Hi everyone and welcome to this video in which we're going to build a website, but not just any website. We're going to build this website right here, which is going to practice our CSS transformations and animations. So there is a lot going on in this website, and not only that, we're going to learn how to actually host it on the internet. Okay, so we're going to have a fully functioning website hosted on a URL. It's going to be codersdxb.com. Okay, and once again, it's going to have this fan out functionality. Everything's going to be contracting and expanding. We're going to be able to rotate all the elements, and then there's also going to be a slider that's going to change the color scheme as well as the line widths of all the elements. And if we click on certain things, there will be text that shows, as well as a whole panel that's going to give us some more information. Okay, so once again, you will have animations such as this fan animation that shows some text when we fan over it, and then we can click on these and it will take us to specific URLs. We can also rotate all these elements. So this is a moving SVG that I made myself and then animated. And if we click on it, it will rotate all the elements like so and rotate them back. We can also expand on some of these using Flexbox, which I will teach you, so that it shows us links or just some text like this smiley face. I've also linked the website that I was inspired by, as well as added some more text about this website if we hover over it. So here is some text to the CodersDXB website. Now I have the same here, and I also have the option to actually change the line widths and border radiuses of all the elements. So as you will see, those will change every time I move my slider up, and it will happen the other way too. So there we go. That is what it looks like. I also have the option to completely change the color scheme by clicking on the X. So we have 3 to our disposal, but of course you can add more. Okay, and again, whatever state this is in, if I rotate it, that state will change. And finally, I also have the option to expand on this, and it will show me a little bit more information about how this site was made. Of course, I will be replacing this with this tutorial that we are watching now, and we can get rid of that too. Okay, so this is really fun, like I said, for those wanting to learn about CSS transformations, animations, and how to actually create your own SVGs as well. So a lot to learn. Let's get to it. Okay, so let's do it. I'm just going to create a new project, and this project, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to call it CodersDXB website. Okay, and let's go ahead and click create. So there we go. I'm just going to create a new file. It's going to be an HTML file that I'm going to call index. So make sure to give it the .html extension if you're not working in WebStorm. I'm going to create a new file. It's going to be a style sheet, so styles CSS, and another one, and it's going to be a JavaScript file, so app.js. So just like that. Those are my 3 files. Okay, so first off, I'm just going to go to Hostinger. So this is what I use to essentially host my files online as well as buy domains. And first off, I'm just going to show you how to buy a domain. So as you can see, I've already bought this one right here. However, if you were to buy your own, you would go to hosting. So all I would do is get a new hosting plan. I would select the premium hosting plan for this particular project, and I would simply select it like so. And then again, you can choose 12 months, 24 months, or 48 months. That is completely up to you. I'm going to choose 12 months for now. So that's all I'm going to do, and I'm just going to complete the payment. So let's go ahead and do that.
First though, make sure to apply the coupon for 10% off. Here is mine that Hostinger have given me for you. Okay, let's continue.
I'm going to complete the payment like so. Of course, you need to have your credit card details set up. Mine are already set up, so that is it. Payment was successful, and I can start now. And I can, obviously, I'm not going to create a new website or migrate my website. I'm going to skip and create a new website. And the domain is going to be CodersDXB, and I'm just going to select that and finish the setup.
If you do not have a domain, you can claim the domain you just purchased in the premium plan by clicking to the main dashboard and claiming yours for free. And then when you have finished, meet back at this point.
Okay, so that's it. That was really easy. Next, let's get to hosting the files that we're going to build on here after we have, of course, created them. So that is going to do its thing. We'll come back to this in a bit. For those of you wondering about billing, you can check it out here. So just go onto billing. You can see your payment history. You can see what is on auto renewal. So I have a few. And under payment methods, you can add another payment method if you wish. Of course, I already have one in here, but if you want to, please go ahead and add your payment details in here so that they are on file. You can choose PayPal or you can choose any card you wish. Okay, so once we have those 3 files set up, let's carry on. So WebStorm already gives me this boilerplate code, which is super handy. I'm just going to go ahead and give this a title of coders DXB so that it shows up in our tab. And next, I'm just going to link up. So I'm going to use the link tag like so. Link up the style sheet. So let's give this rel style sheet. And I'm going to use href, and we're going to get that style CSS file. Great. Now that we've done that, let's also link up our app.js file with a script tag at the bottom. So after any other tags that we choose to put in here have been read, we then read our JavaScript. So once again, there is my app.js file that I've linked up. There's not in a folder or anything, so we just put the file name as well as the CSS file. So great, that's really it. Now to view this in WebStorm, I just have to click this button right here and that will show up and we can inspect the page. And as you will see, there is just our script tag in there at the moment. If you are not on WebStorm, you can view the HTML page simply by clicking on it and then copying the absolute path and just pasting in next, so both things do the same thing. Great, now let's get to adding all the elements that we need. So what I'm going to do, so this is going to be quite a lot, so just bear with me. I'm going to create a few divs. The first one is going to have the class of hidden box, as that is the box that we have hidden at the side. So I'm going to give this the class of hidden box so we can pick it out. Next, I'm going to have a div, and this is going to essentially hold all my text. So let's give it the class of text box so that we know that it holds our text. And I'm also going to give another class of hidden, as originally we want this hidden. Next, in here, I'm just going to put the h2 element, and it's going to say, want to see how this site was made, question mark. And then we're going to have a p element. And it's just going to say, follow along with this tutorial from Anya Kubo. Okay, and then maybe let's have another P element. I'm just going to get rid of that. And it's just going to have a little bit about me. So I'm just going to paste in some text that I have made previously. It's going to say, Anya is a software developer raised in the UAE. She frequently puts out tutorials on her. And then I'm going to actually use the A tag because I'm going to want to link to my YouTube channel. And I'm just going to put YouTube channel, just like so. And then we can link this. So I'm going to use the href and I'm just going to link to my, you guessed it, YouTube channel. So I'm just going to copy this. And I'm going to paste it in like so. So that is it. So at the moment, it will look like that. And if we click on here, it will take you to my YouTube channel. Great. Let's also put a space there. So wonderful. Next, I'm going to put in an iframe. So let's actually put in the iframe here. And this iframe is essentially going to go to my YouTube video, which we obviously don't have yet. And I'm going to put a P element here after that saying click here to view more. And I'm going to wrap this in an A element as well. So it's a link and I'm just going to link it to the same thing. So my YouTube channel. So I'm just going to paste that in like so. So wonderful. That should look like that. Great. Let's carry on. So I want to give this the class of hidden, right? So I'm going to actually grab hidden. And in here, I'm going to grab the class of hidden. And I'm just going to do display none. so that now if that class has the class of hidden, it is hidden. And we can toggle that class later on. So great, let's move on. So that is my hidden box. Next, after that, so where is the closing tag to this? The hidden box finishes there. I'm just going to tab this out a little bit, so format it a bit better so we can move on. Now, what else do I want in here? Well, actually, let's also put in a div, so straight after that, and this is going to have the class of box container, as it's going to hold all our boxes. That's going to hold all the little pills that we see. So the first div, well, this is going to be a small box, so let's give this the class of small box, just like so. And I'm also going to give the class of box, so we can pick out all the boxes if we need, regardless if they have the class of small box or large box, as we will do later. Now, this small box is also going to have a div inside of it that's going to hold something with a class of pill, because we're going to make a bunch of pills. And this one in particular is going to have a div, and this div is going to hold an arrow, as our first one holds an arrow. So let's give this the class of arrow. It's also going to have the class of left expand arrow, just because we want the arrow to be facing left, so we can pick it out. So again, two classes, one class and another class. Great, so that is one box. Next, we're going to have a long box. So once again, I'm going to give this div the class. This time it's going to be long box, but it's also a box, so I want to pick them all out, so I'm going to give it the class of box. Okay, and once again, let's give it a div that has the class of pill. So there we go. This box is actually also going to hold our social fan that fans out. So I'm going to give the class of social fan. So it has 3 classes on it. Next, I'm going to put some more pills in here, but these are going to be hidden pills. So I'm going to give this the class of hidden pill. But it's also going to be for socials, because I want to pick all 3 out. And this one is also going to have the class of Instagram, so that we can give them all different positionings. And I'm also going to make it hidden. So there's one. I'm actually going to post this 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. And this one's going to have email. And this one's going to have coding tips, as that is what's going to hold. So coding tips. And each of these, well, I'm just going to put an A tag in them. And this is going to say Instagram. And the href for this is going to be to my Instagram. So let's grab my Instagram. That is my URL for Instagram. And I'm just going to paste that in. Let's also do the same for email. This one is going to have an A tag and it's going to say email. And I'm going to use the mail to for this, so that it opens up an email, and it's going to email me at anya@codewithanya.com. And now let's have it to coding tips. So this is just going to take me to some coding tips. So I'm just going to do href, and the link I want to take me to is this one, so bytes.dev, and it's also just got a tracking thing here because I'm a partner of this. So I'm just going to paste it in like so. Great. So this is looking good. Let's move on. So that is one whole box. Next, I'm going to create another box. So let's go ahead and give this the class of long box again. It's a box and a div, which is going to have the class of pill. This pill, however, is going to hold an SVG, which is a rotating icon that I'm going to make myself. So I'm just going to put SVG in here for now. Okay, and do that a bit later. I'm doing this a bit later as we're going to actually create our own SVGs for this using Figma, and I'm going to show you how to do that later. So now that we have that long box, I'm just going to create another div and give this one the class of small box this time. It's also a box and another div, which is going to have the class of pill. So I'm sure you are getting the hang of this now. This pill is not going to do much, so I'm just going to leave it like so. Next, I'm going to also create a div with a class of long box. So let's maybe just paste that in like so, and put in a div with a class of pill. However, this pill is going to have an aref, and it's going to take us to the inspiration behind this. So I'm just going to go ahead and put inspired by sam.am. And as the href for this, I'm just going to put Sam website. So this is his website, sam.am. So once again, I'm just going to copy that and paste it in like so. Great. Next up is a small box. I'm just going to copy that and paste it. Next, let's actually have a small box, and I'm going to make this stretchable. So I'm going to actually add a stretchable class to it. And maybe in here, just for fun, I'm going to put a p element, so just some text, and it's just going to be a smiley face. And once again, I'm just going to give this the class of hidden for now. Let's do another small box. Maybe let's put it above here. Actually, it's going to be stretchable. And this time, I'm just going to put the word newsletter like so. Let's make this an a tag, as it's going to be a link. And as the href for this, well, we don't actually have a newsletter, so maybe let's leave that blank, but we can fill it in at a later time. For now, I'm just going to make it maybe go to codewithania.com. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to put codewithania.com. Okay, great. So after this small box that is stretchable, I'm going to put in a large box. So class long box, also with the class name of box. And then I'm going to put a div in here. I'm also maybe going to give this an ID, because I want this to take over more of the screen, and I'm going to pick it out by this ID. It's of course going to have a pill in it. So let's do pill. And in here, I'm going to add a div. This is going to have the class name of logo container. And we're going to put an image in here, and it's going to be to our logo essentially. So it's going to have a source, and we're going to do alternative text for the visually impaired. So coder DXB logo. Okay, great. And after that, what do I want to do? I'm going to have a div, and we're going to actually put in an arrow, but I'm going to put it in a container as well. So arrow container. And that just means that we can now use div. I'm going to give this the class of arrow, so we can pick up all the arrows, but also give it a unique class of right expand arrow. So we can use a right arrow instead. Great. So let's move on. So that is my whole long box. So let's move on. So now right after the whole logo container, so this ends here, I'm going to now create another div, and this is going to have the class of text box, as it's going to hold some text, and it's going to be hidden to start. So I'm once again going to put in some text in here. This is going to say coders DXB, and I'm going to put in a p element. And once again, I'm just going to stick in some text. So perhaps I'm just going to put it on 2 lines so that we can see all of it. So that's one p element. We're going to have another p element. It's going to have this text. So once again, I'm just putting in a bunch of text and another p element. And this is going to say, make sure to, and we're going to have an a link again, sign up to our newsletter to stay updated. Okay, and let's give this the href of, you know, what we were using, because we don't really have a newsletter quite yet. I'm just going to use this URL. So that's all I am doing. Again, I could put this on a few lines if I wish. Great. So where does this whole long box finish? This is a long one. It finishes there. Now I'm going to put another div. This is going to be unique. So this is going to be the X box, and I'm going to treat it a bit differently because it's going to hold an SVG. So I'm going to put X box, and in my X box, I'm going to put a P element that says click. And then I'm going to put in an SVG. Again, we are going to make this in Figma, so I'm going to comment it out for now. And now we are nearly done. We're just going to put in one more large box. So you guessed it, we're going to have a div within a div. Let's give this the class of long box. It's also a box. I'm going to give this the ID of squish, as we are going to be squishing it. And let's give this the class of pill so that it looks like a pill. Great. And this is also going to have some text. So let's give this a div. Let's give it the class of text box. It's going to be hidden to start. And we're just going to put a P element in here. And the text is going to be, have a cool tech event you want us to promote. Contact us. And then I'm going to put an A element here. Okay. And the href for this, I think it should be the mail to. So I'm just going to add an option to mail us like we did up here. So that's all I am going to do for that. And finally, we have one last thing. Again, this is unique. So I'm going to give this the div. I'm going to give this the class of slider container, as it's going to hold our slider. I'm going to count it in with the boxes though, and in here I'm going to make a div. It's going to have the class of pill, but in here, however, we're going to have another div. I'm going to give this the class of input container, and in here we're going to have an input. Okay, and I'm going to want to pick this out. So I'm going to give this the ID of slider input. I'm going to give this a type of range so that it shows up as a range input and not a text input. Let's also assign a min and a max value. So min, I'm going to do 0. Max, I'm going to do 10. The starting value I'm going to put as 0 for default, and the step of this is going to be 1. So the increments by 1 each time. And great, that is really it. Okay, so at the moment, this really won't look like much. It won't look very nice because it's just HTML and a bunch of stuff is hidden, okay, to start. So now let's get to styling this up. So what I'm going to do is just go in here and let's do it. So first off, I'm just going to go ahead and say that everything in this project, I just want to make any transition that happens here. So I'm going to do all. I'm going to do 0.5 second ease in and out. So that transition will be applied to any transition that happens in here. Next, I'm also going to add the font family, and I'm going to choose Poppins. Okay, so this is something that we're going to have to import from Google Fonts, and I'm going to have sans serif as a backup. So let's do it. I'm just going to go over to Google Fonts for this. So here is the URL, and we're just going to search for Poppins. So Poppins is this one right here, and then you can select which one we want. I'm just going to select all of them, the not italic ones, so that we have all these weights to our disposal. Okay, so I think that's fine for now. So this just means if you click on here, you can import them into your CSS file simply by taking this code right here. Okay, and I'm just going to do that import up here. So that is it, along with all these weights, and then we're using the font family here as per the code written here. So that's it. So now I refresh this, that Poppins text shall be applied. Wonderful. I'm also just going to change the font color to be this kind of gray rather than black. So 383838. And there we go. And I'm just going to make the font weight 200 overall. So that is one of the ones that we imported. Wonderful. Next, on the body itself, I'm just going to get rid of any default padding as well as margin. So I'm just going to set them both to 0. So just like so. Okay, and another thing that we're going to do is grab any A tag and just get rid of the text decoration that it comes with as a default. So the underline and the color, and great. Now, the other thing that I want to do is actually grab the whole box container. So anything that holds our boxes, because I want all the boxes to stack over each other. So perhaps maybe let's actually grab anything with the class of small box first. So small box. And all my small boxes are essentially going to have a minimum height of 150 pixels and a min width. And the min width is going to be 250 pixels. And I'm going to use flex grow on them, but I'll show you why in a bit. I'm going to go flex grow 1. And for now, let's just give them a background color of red so we can see what's going on. So there are all our small boxes. Of course, you can't really see much. Let's also grab anything with the class of box. So all our boxes, whether they're small or long, are going to now have a padding of 10 pixels as well. Okay, so there we go. Great. Now let's also pick out anything with a class of long box. And the long box, well, essentially, I'm just going to copy all of this, but change it up. So the long box, the min height is going to be 150 pixels. However, the min width is going to be 500 pixels. And flex grow for this is going to be 4. And maybe let's change the background color to blue this time. So at the moment, that is what it looks like. Okay, great. Now the padding that we applied to these boxes, I've done that because I want the padding to be on the inside. So then when we put in the pill, it will stick to the outer edges of this parent, but also have a padding in between it. So this just means that now if I create a pill, I'm going to say the height of it is going to be 100% of the parent, which is either a long box or a small box or whatever it's in. The width is going to be 100% too. And I'm going to apply a border, which is going to be solid 12 pixels. And as the color, I'm going to use the same color I used for the font. So it's going to be that color. Now the box sizing, I want to do inside the box. So I'm going to go border box. And I'm also, so at the moment, it will look like this. As you can see here, there is nothing inside of these, which is why it's looking like so. Let's go ahead and give them a border radius of 100 pixels. So great, they are rounded off. And now let's just make sure that anything we put inside the pill is centered. And for this, I'm going to use display flex. So I've initialized flexbox so that I can use justify content center to center everything from left to right, and align items center to center everything from top to bottom. These two won't work without that. And also this one will not work without a height. So that is what we have done. Okay, great. Now, instead of stacking over each other, I want these boxes to wrap over each other. And for that, I need to get the box container. And I'm going to initialize flexbox again. So display flex. And I'm going to do flex wrap. So they wrap over each other. I'm also going to make sure the whole box container has a height, and it's going to be 100 of the viewport height. Okay. And then I'm also going to do align items stretch so that they stretch out from top to bottom. So at the moment, it will look like that. And there you go. You can also see now how all the pills, you can see the small pills, the long pills, everything's kind of coming together a lot more thanks to display flex. And you know, they can stretch out now, and it kind of looks good in most browser sizes. So let's continue. So a bunch more stuff to do. Let's carry on. Let's go back to the long box. Now, on the website, these two boxes actually are not long boxes, but they also need to have a height. So let's go ahead and maybe change them from long boxes to large boxes. So that happens on this box right here, the one with ID takeover. So let's change this to large box. And let's also change it on this one right here. I'm going to change it to large box. Okay, so that means that we need to make a large box class now. I'm going to go large box. And the large box, well, again, let's just copy all of this. This time is going to have a min height of also 500 pixels and a min width of 410 pixels, okay, with flex grow 2. And let's make the background color green, just so we can see what's going on. And there we go. So that is much more what it's looking like at the moment, much more like our website that we intended. Next, let's actually maybe tackle on doing the slider input next. So that's what I'm going to do. So the slider input. Well, the slider, so let's go here. Let's grab this slider container. So I'm just going to, maybe let's move this up here as it's kind of general. And let's grab the element by the class of slider container. And my slider container, well, I'm going to give this a min height of 500 pixels, like the large boxes. I'm going to assign it a width, so not a min width, just a width that I want it to keep to. And I think that should be fine. I'm also going to get a Z index. I think, or maybe we don't, but if we just keep it as it is, we'll just change the Z index of its children. So that is what it looks like at the moment. I've just kind of made it a bit thinner, and let's style up this input next. So now that we have the slider container, I'm going to grab the input container. And essentially what I want to do is position that input container in according to the parent. So if this is the parent, I'm just going to give this the position of relative so that we can use position absolute on its child. Okay, and I'm just going to make sure that the input container is from the bottom of its parent 50 pixels up and from the left 105 pixels. Okay, so there we go. I'm just going to inspect this so we can work with it a bit better. Okay, so there it is. We now need to rotate the input, but I'm going to do it by the whole input container. So we're going to use transform rotate to do this. So what I'm going to do is on the actual input container itself, I'm going to do transform rotate, and I'm going to rotate it negative 90 degrees. Okay, so if we do this, I'm just going to show you what happens. We rotate it. We can also change the transform origin. So I can do transform origin and make it rotate from the bottom left. Okay, so that is something that we can do, and then it will appear here. Okay, great. And we just want to make sure that it's always at the top, which is why I'm also going to give it a Z index of 2, just to make sure it's at the top so that we can always interact with it. Okay, nice. Now let's get to actually styling the input itself. So we can do the input that lives inside the input container, or actually let's just do the slider container just in case you want to add any other inputs that have the input container. And now in order to get rid of the appearance, we're going to use WebKit appearance none. And now we're going to set a width to it of 420 pixels, which will, because we rotated it, the width will be applied here. So obviously at the moment we can't see it because we did web appearance none. So let's also give it a height, which in this case it will be the width as we rotated. And I'm just going to give it a background of RGBA 18990.6 to make it a little bit transparent. So at the moment it will look like that. So pretty cool. I'm just going to round it off. So let's go ahead and do border radius 5 pixels. So just like so. So this is looking quite cool if I say so myself. Next, let's get the thumb. So once again, I'm just going to get all of this and I am going to get the thumb. So we're going to use WebKit slider thumb. And, you know, we can be very specific. We can say that only on the type of input that has the type of range if we wish. So you could have applied that there too. It is totally up to you. Okay, so now that we have the thumb, let's style it up. So once again, I'm just going to do WebKit appearance none to get rid of any default. I'm going to give it a height of 100 pixels. Let's go ahead and give it a width of 100 pixels. I'm going to round it off, so border radius, let's go with 50%. And the background color, I'm going to go with white. So RGB 255, 255, 255. So just like so. And let's also now give it a border. So RGB, and we're going to go with the dark gray that we've been using. Solid 14 pixels. Okay, great. And I'm going to do cursor grab. So we change the cursor when we hover over it. I'm going to make sure that it's even more in front of the other thing that we just styled, so the line, by giving it Z index 3. So there we go. How cool is that? We can do background color here if we wish, just to keep things a little bit more consistent. Wonderful. So I think this is looking great. Maybe we should move it over just a tiny bit. So maybe left 102. So just use your eye to make that as centered as possible. Wonderful. So I like how this is looking. Let's carry on. Next, I'm going to show you how to create SVGs in Figma. So let's do it. So I'm just going to head over to Figma. So this is the project that I was working on. I created this element. I'm just going to show you how I did it. So all I did was essentially get this line tool. So make sure to open up a new project in Figma. So let's go back to our files. You would create a new design file. So you just click on that, and then you would be able to draw anything that you wish. Okay. However, I've already made mine. So I'm just going to go to Recents. And I'm just going to select this one right here. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get this tool, and what I would do is essentially draw this X. So I just created a line. So for example, let's just make a line. I'm starting off at y-axis. Let's go -500. And if I click here, let's go 355. So 355 plus 500 is 855. Which means that if I was to add 855 to this, would give me 3920.5. So now I've created a square. So that's all I wanted to do. So I would go ahead and copy that and then click off it, paste it in again, put it somewhere down here. And now I'm going to scale it, but scale it, so press Shift. So maybe something like here. And I think that's fine. So now cut that, and now make sure that you're working with this and paste it in like so. So just make sure that basically they're one vector, right? Because at the moment we're working with two vectors. So if you're not sure, just double click on this again, okay, until all these little dots show up, and paste it. So that's part of vector 31 still. And now I'm just going to do it again, but just put it in all the corners. Okay, so that's all I'm doing, making sure it kind of clicks into the corners like so. Great. So again, just make sure they're all on vector 31. Now I'm just going to delete all the lines I don't want, which is essentially these lines right here. So I'm just going to delete these. So on the little squares. So just keep double clicking until you get in it, making sure not to delete the whole thing. Okay, so you'll know when it's got these dots like so that you are working with the right thing. So again, I'm just going around deleting all these lines just like that. And now let's connect them back up. So I'm just going to go like this, go like that, go like that, and go like that. So now that we have that, I'm just going to round these off. Let's go with 100's too much, maybe more like 30 or maybe 40. And I'm going to make the stroke of these 14. So there we go. And we can always change this. So maybe I do want it to be bigger. It is completely up to you. Okay, so that's what I have done. And if you want to make the other ones a bit smaller, so maybe let's go 60. And now I'm just going to click on the little ones here. So make sure to select that one. So just this one here. And I'm going to go with 30 for that one. And then again, 30 for this one. And click on that one, make it 30. And make this one 32. Great. So now that we've done that, I'm just going to rotate the whole thing. So again, I'm literally just going to rotate, and we can set the rotation here, 45, like so. So there we have it. I'm just going to scale it to be a little bit bigger, and essentially we've made an X. It's not exactly the same as this one. I'd probably have to work with it a little bit more, but you get the idea. Just go ahead and make an X that you like. So try to use those measurements, right? So 855 is how big my square was, because now we're going to export it. So I'm actually going to export this one, but we could export that one, and all you'd have to do is click export, make sure this is SVG, and export vector 31. And now if you go into your downloads, you can double click it, and there it will be, and you just inspect it, and you can copy this, copy the whole element. Okay, I'm just going to move that out for you so you can see. But essentially we are copying the whole element, and then we would just go back here, and I'm going to paste it in this SVG like so. So now if we look in here, there is our X, and we can scale it. Like I said though, I prefer this one, so I'm just going to export this one, make sure it's SVG, export, and I'm just going to open that up in here. So once again, inspect, I'm going to copy this whole thing, so copy the element, and now I'm going to paste it in like so. So that is just my preferred X that I made, except it's very big. So I'm going to show you how to scale that down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that any SVG that is inside the class of Xbox, so let's just move that down, class of Xbox, if an SVG lives inside of it, I'm going to use transform scale 0.95. Okay, so that is a nice way to scale your SVG if it's not the right size. One thing we are also going to do is on here, I'm just going to make sure that the width is 100% and the height is 100% of the Xbox itself, so that now it looks like that. Okay, and we are not yet done. Let's once again grab the class of Xbox, and I'm going to give it a min height of 500 pixels, a min width of 410 pixels, so just like the large boxes, and I'm going to go flex grow 1, and I'm going to center that SVG inside of it. So I'm going to use display flex justify content center, as well as align items center, and I'm going to want to be able to click on it. So I'm going to go cursor pointer so we can visually see that it is clickable. Okay, great. So now this looks like that. Wonderful. And we're going to manipulate the width of this stroke in our CSS. For now though, I'm just going to do it manually. I'm going to get the path, and at the end, I'm just going to do RGB 383838. And actually the stroke width is a bit small, so let's go with 16. That is looking cool. Maybe let's even make it a bit bigger. So 20. I think that should be fine. I'm just going to scale out a little bit just because this is a lot larger for us, as I have zoomed in my screen quite a lot. So there we go. Next, let's position this click so that it's over the X by giving it a position of absolute. So let's do it. So I think we're good with this. Let's also give this SVG an ID so we can pick it out for when we click on it. And we're just going to give this the ID of X letter SVG, like so. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is say that any P element that lives inside the element with the class of Xbox, it's going to have a position of absolute, and I'm going to make sure that from the top it's 40%, and I'm also going to make sure that the Z index of it is super at the front, so let's just go with 10 to make sure. And this means that, of course, we need to give the Xbox a position of relative. So I'm going to go with position relative because that is the parent, and we want that click to appear relative to that parent. So there we go. We've done it. This is looking great. Now, we only want to show this text if we hover over it, right? So this means that actually the P element, I'm going to go with display none to start off with. However, if we hover over it, so hover, make sure that says hover, I'm going to go with display block. Okay, so that's all I have done. And it just means that if we now hover over the X box, ta-da, we can see that coming in. Wonderful. This is looking great. Maybe we should make that text larger so that it appears a little bit bigger, but we will move on to that later. So this is looking good. Next up, let's add the SVG for the rotating icon as well as the arrows next. So let's do it. I'm just going to go back to Figma, and essentially this is the icon we need to make. So I made this relatively easily. All I did was go here and I created a circle. So I just did this, and I didn't have a fill, so we got rid of the fill. I did have a stroke, so let's go ahead and make that stroke 14 just for now. Maybe let's make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so it's 120 by 120 for those who want to copy me. And then I'm just going to get this. So I'm going to double click into this. Okay, so it's highlighted like that. And I'm just going to add basically a line that goes from here and then to here. And then I'm also going to add a line here. And now I'm going to delete some of these lines. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that one like so, and delete this one like so. And then of course you can change how big or how little you want this, but essentially that is kind of what I want to make. So there we go, that is it. That's all I have done. So once again, you can see the dimensions of it. Try to keep your dimensions the same as mine, and then you can export it. So all you would do is go here, export, and then you would export the SVG, export that. And then once you have done that, you would open it up in here, and then once again, inspect this, and then you would copy the element and then paste it in like so. And I'm just going to paste it in wherever the other SVG should be. So right here. Okay, so just go ahead and do that. Let's also maybe give the class of rotating icon so we can pick it out to make it rotate later on. So that's all I have done. Great. Let's get rid of that. And we are now done with Figma. So I'm just going to close that too. Okay, so there it is. Of course, we do need to do some styling to it, but we will do that in a bit. I think we should actually add another square here. So another small square. So actually, let's copy this. And I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to put that in this small pill. And let's also give this the ID of reverse. So that if we click on it, we reverse which way the boxes are essentially wrapping over each other. So now it should look more like that. And I'm just going to zoom out a little bit more as well. Okay, great. So that's what it should look like on your computer if you're working on a normal size desktop, not like my tiny screenshot that I'm working with. Next, let's style this up a little bit more. So let's do it. So maybe let's just change the width and the height of this, just like so. So I'm just manually going to change it here rather than doing it in CSS, but you can do it in CSS too. And now let's make it rotate. So all I'm going to do is literally in the style sheet, I'm going to grab the class of rotating icon and let's go ahead and rotate this. So I'm going to do animation. The animation I want to do is rotate. So we're going to have to define that. And I want to rotate for 10 seconds infinitely. So now let's define this animation. And for that, we need keyframes. And then we define the rotate animation at 0%. So at the start of my 10 seconds, I want it to be rotating, but just start off at 0 degrees. And by the end, so after 10 seconds, so at 100% of the animation, I want it to transform 360 degrees. And then it does it again and again forever, infinitely. So there we go. How cool is that? So that is looking good. One other thing that I'm going to do is just change the color of this, so the stroke to be RGB 383838, just to keep it consistent with the kind of dark gray that we have. Okay, again, you could have done it in the CSS. It is totally up to you. Wonderful. Let's do the animated arrows next. So again, in the style sheet, I'm going to create an arrow. So there's two arrows. We've given them both the class of arrow. And to make an arrow, I'm going to do border solid RGB 383838. The border width is going to be 0 on the top, 12 pixels on the right, 12 pixels at the bottom, and 0 on the left. So already that will create this kind of shape. And once we add a padding, so I'm going to just give it a padding of 12 pixels, we will already have this kind of shape, so kind of like an arrow. Now we just need to rotate it. So let's do it. So the first one, let's find the first arrow. We gave it left expand arrow. So let's essentially position it left. And I'm going to do so by essentially adding an animation. So I'm going to do animation. I'm going to do bounce left. And I want this to essentially happen for 3 seconds infinitely. And now let's do keyframes and define bounce left. And at 0% of my animation, actually at 0%, but also at 20%, also at 50%, and also at 80%, and then also at 100%. These are the styles that I want to apply. I want to transform, translate X 0, and then rotate the whole thing 135 degrees. Okay? Now at 40%, I'm just going to do this again, but I'm going to translate X minus 30 pixels, keep the rotation the same, and then at 60%, I want to transform minus 15 pixels. So let's see how that looks. Making sure that is left expand arrow. So there we go. Now it's kind of bouncing. I'm just going to make it move maybe a little bit more to the left. So I'm going to add margin right of 60 pixels as well. So there we go. There it is. Now let's work on this arrow next, which is doing some funky stuff because of display flex. So with this other arrow, let's go and find it. So this arrow, okay, we have the arrow, we've given it that styling. However, we now need to make it go right. So let's grab this class and do right expand arrow. So it's going to be very similar to the above, okay? So this time I'm just going to literally grab this. Let's do bounce right instead, and let's define our animation. And for this, I'm just going to grab the whole animation really, so the whole thing like so. And I'm just going to switch out the rotations. So to bounce right, let's change this to right. I'm going to essentially rotate this minus 45 degrees instead. So minus 45 degrees, minus 45 degrees, and minus 45 degrees. So I think that should be it. And let's change these from negatives to positives. So now that is it. However, we need to also do something because obviously it's stretching out because of display flex. So let's work on maybe this square next. Okay, great. So that square is basically the large box with the ID of takeover. And we're going to have to style the logo container, I believe, to get rid of that. So the logo container, well, I'm just going to essentially use display flex and align the items center. Okay, so that each of these are next to each other rather than stacked over each other to get rid of that funky behavior. So this is looking good. Next, let's add the actual logo itself. So let's do it. I'm just going to make another directory here. So a new directory called images, in which I'm just going to drag in my logo. So it's just a logo that I made previously. It's a transparent PNG, and I'm just going to drag it into the images directory so that we can use it. So now in here, in the logo container, I can go into my images and I can get coders.dxb transparent PNG. So that's all I have done. So if we now look in here, there is our logo. However, it's very big. I don't like it. Let's change it. So once again, I'm actually going to grab the logo container this time and then grab the image. So the logo container, I'm going to say its max width should be 250 pixels. And then any image that lives inside the element with the class of logo container, I'm just going to make sure that the width is 100%. So just like that. Okay, wonderful. So that is looking good. Next, I think let's tackle the fanning of these pills. So let's do that next. So to do this, I'm actually going to go back to my pills, these ones, and let's remove hidden from them so we can actually see them. I'm going to have to re-add that, but of course we want to actually see them. So let's grab the class of a hidden pill as well so we can style it up. Because at the moment, it will just look like this, right? Because we haven't added any class to the hidden pill class. Okay, so the hidden pill, like the normal pill, I'm going to make it a height of 100%, a width of 100%. A border of solid 12 pixels, RGB 383838, and then box sizing border box. Let's round it off by giving it a border radius of 100 pixels, and at this time I'm just going to text align center. So my hidden pill looks very much like the normal pill at the moment, except it's hidden down here. Next, what I'm going to do is essentially get each of the pills individually and position them. And for this, I'm going to have to essentially say that any hidden pill or anything with a class of social that lives inside of here is going to have a position of absolute. And for that, the parent, which is of course the social fan, needs to have a position of relative. So let's go with relative. And now, like I said, anything that lives inside an element with a class of fan that also has the class of, so dot of social, is going to have a position absolute. Okay, and I'm going to position it from the top 0, from the right 0, just like we've been positioning previously. And the transform origin, okay, transform origin this time, like we did previously, is going to be from the top right hand corner of the parent. And I'm also going to make sure that the Z index, I want them to be kind of in front. So that's what I have done. So now all three are kind of stacked on top of each other, as you can see with the writing there. So now let's pick each one out individually. So the first one is Instagram. So let's go ahead and pick that one out by the class of Instagram. But it's only if it lives inside the social fan and if we hover over it. Okay, so if we hover over it, I want to actually see it all of a sudden. Okay, because it should be hidden. Of course, we got rid of that. I'm going to animate it. And I'm going to fan Instagram for 1 second, ease in, out. Okay, and then I'm also going to do animation fill mode forward. So it doesn't keep doing it. It kind of just stops. It doesn't revert back to anything else. So there we go. Now let's define it. So at keyframes, fan Instagram. At 0%, I want to transform it because I want to rotate it 90 degrees. Okay, from the right 0, top 0. Okay, and then at 100%, I also want all of these. However, I'm going to make it go to minus 20 degrees. Now, if I keep this, I'm just going to show you what happens. So if I hover over this, whoop, there it goes, whoop, right? However, it's kind of like moved over there at the final position. I don't want that, which is why I'm going to go right 40 pixels and then top minus 12 pixels. So now when I fan over it, whoop, it kind of sticks there. And I'm now going to add the class of hidden to the one with Instagram so that it's hidden to start with. Okay, so it's hidden to start with, and if I go like that, there it comes. Even though I don't know why it's coming from all the way at the top, that is pretty strange. We'll start with 0 to start. Okay, so now, there we go. Let's do the same for the others. So I'm literally just going to copy all of this. We've done Instagram. The next one is email. So if it has the class of email, I want to fan email. But this time, yes, we're going to start off with it being at 0. That is correct. But next, I'm going to make it go to minus 40. And we're going to make it 100 pixels from the right this time and minus 16 from the top. So now, there we go. And just one more to do. Let's hide the email first. So unless we hover on it, I want it hidden. Okay, so there we go. And the last one is coding tips. So once again, I'm going to grab the keyframes and this one right here and change it for the coding tips. So anything with a class of coding tips. That's right, fan coding tips. And let's just change the animation here to be coding tips. And the final state of that rotation is going to be minus 60 degrees. And then I'm just going to move it right a bit more and top 20. So now, ta-da, that is what they look like. Great. However, I don't know why they're not more hidden. Why is that? So we've got the class of hidden here. So let's add hidden here as well. Okay, wonderful. So now they only show when we hover over them. This is looking so cool. Let's carry on. The other thing I want to do is just stretch some of these out when we hover over them. So we added the class of stretchable to some things. Okay, so if we look for stretchable, we have stretchable on these. So I'm just going to essentially grab the class of stretchable. And if we hover on anything with that class, I'm just going to change the flex grow to be 5 and make it important. Okay, and that just means that anything with stretchable, so I can't remember which ones it is, this one will kind of stretch. So that is looking quite cool. I'm really happy with this. I think also if we hover over this big square right here, we actually want to change the squish box. So I'm going to show you how to do that. If we hover over this one, we want to change the squish box. We want to squish it. So to write this, well, first off, I'm going to grab the element with the ID of takeover. And if I hover over it, I'm going to look for essentially a sibling. Okay, so this is how you look for a sibling. It has to be a sibling, so it can't be a parent or a child. And if that sibling has the ID of squish, I'm just going to make the min width of it 0. So just like that. And that just means if I, like I said, hover over this, that is going to try be 0. It's not being 0 though. Why is that? We will come back to that later because I also want to show the text in here if I hover over the takeover element. So let's do it. Again, if we hover over the takeover element, I'm going to get the arrow container, so the element with the class of arrow container that lives inside of it, and just hide the arrow. So I'm going to do display none. So just like that. And now let's show the text. Okay, so once again, maybe if I hover over the large, this one, or actually any of these, so let's grab them both. I could do so by grabbing any element with a class of large box and saying if I hover over either of them, I'm going to flex grow by 10 and make this important. Okay, So there we go. That is looking much better. I'm happy with that. And now let's show the text. So again, if I hover over the large box, any child that has the class of text box is going to be visible. So I'm going to override hidden by writing display block. Okay, so that's overriding the display none from the display hidden that we saw earlier. So this is great. However, this is very large. I think I should give it a max width. So let's just also say that any text box that lives inside a large box is going to have a max width of 300 pixels. Okay, and now also let's say that any P element that lives inside of that is going to have the font size of 18 pixels, right? And also any A element. So perhaps let's just copy that. Any A element will also have 18 pixels, but I'm also going to make the color of it RGB and this kind of darkish red that I picked out earlier. So now this will look like that. How cool is that? We are now seeing the text. So this is wonderful. I'm super happy with this. Also, when we hover over one of these, we should see some text. So let's have a look at what's in here. So in these small boxes, we have a class of hidden. So if something has a small box with a class of stretchable, this is how you would write this. So we're going to look for anything with a small box that also has the class of stretchable. So that class has to exist on this element. So we're looking for an element with a class of small box that also has a class of stretchable. And if we hover over it, anything with a class of hidden, any child with a class of hidden will be overwritten with display block so that it is visible. Okay, so that just means that we can see the text here and we can see the text here. Great. So that now covers everything we need to do. Let's get to adding colors, and we're going to do so with JavaScript, as well as reverse the direction, as well as showcase more of the stuff here, and then be able to change the colors by clicking here, as well as change the different styles and themes when we move this slider. So let's do it. So I'm going to move on to the app.js file now. So first off, I'm just going to pick out a bunch of stuff. I'm going to pick out these slider inputs. I'm going to use document, query selector. I'm going to look for the element with the ID of slider input. So just like that, so that we can work with it. Next, let's pick out all the boxes, right? This is why I gave all the boxes the separate class of box, so that we can pick them all out. So I'm going to use document query selector. I'm going to look for anything with the class of box. And we're going to get all the pills. So all pills, just like so. I'm going to use document.query selector and look for anything with the class of pill. So dot is for class name, just like so. Now let's get all the hidden pills. So I'm literally just grabbing everything, right? So const all hidden pills. This time, let's go into the document and search for anything with the class of hidden pill. So it's going to be the three ones that fan out. Let's also grab the arrows, so all arrows. So we're going to look in our document again. We're going to use query selector to look for anything with the class of arrow. So just like that. We're also going to have to grab the actual body itself. So let's go const body equals, and we're going to look in the document. We're going to use query selector to look for the element of body. Now, let's go ahead and pick out this pill. So if we click on it, we expand to the left. So we essentially reveal a whole column. I'm actually going to go ahead and give it the ID. So it's the first small box. Let's give this. So I have it click on the whole box. Then we want to expand. So let's pick out this whole element by the ID of expand. So I'm just going to call it expand pill equals document query selector. So we're going to be picking a lot of stuff out. Great. Next, let's pick out the letter X. So once again, const, what should we call this? Maybe let's call it X letter equals document query selector. And now let's pick out the X letter. So let's go ahead and find it in here. I'm just going to scroll down. So let's pick it out by, well, I think we should pick out the path itself, because the path is essentially what the X letter is. So I'm going to give it the ID of X letter. This will be the whole SVG, and this will be the box that holds the X. So let's do it. I'm going to pick out the path essentially. So I'm just going to look for the ID of X letter, and that is now saved to the path. We could have path here, or we could just keep it as that. It's up to you. Next is pick out the SVG as we just saw. So X letter SVG, document query selector, and it was X letter SVG, and it was an ID. Great. Let's also pick out the X box. So all the three that we just saw, X box equals document query selector, and we're going to look for the X box. Great. Now I'm going to essentially look for the element that if we click on it, it's going to expand our social fan. Okay, so we're going to pick it out, not because we want to expand anything, just because we want to style it up. So I'm going to pick out this element that holds all three of the social pills. Let's call it social fan equals document. If you don't like the way I'm naming something, then of course, please feel free to change it. This is just naming conventions that I think fit. Next, we're going to pick out the reverse pill. So the pill that we click if we want to reverse the essential order of our pills. So I think that was like the third box or something like that. So here we have the box to expand, the social ones, and then, yeah, let's pick out this whole box. So let's pick it out by the ID of reverse. Great. Next, I'm going to pick out the whole box container. So everything that holds all our boxes. So query selector. And then what is it again? It is the box container. So it's a class name. So once again, I'm going to look for the box container. Now let's go for the icon SVG. So I'm going to use document query selector to pick out the rotating. So the rotating icon, well, I guess we've given this a class, but we also want to give the path a class. So we just essentially change the path color. So this will have rotating icon because essentially the whole SVG is rotating. However, this I just want to pick out by the icon itself. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and look for anything with the icon so we can change the SVG path. Okay, great. Maybe let's just go ahead and change this to path so it's more obvious, and same for this one. So icon SVG, icon path. And now we are nearly done. Let's also pick out the hidden box so we can unhide it. So once again, maybe let's say this is hidden box equals document query selector. We're going to look for the class of hidden box. And next, I just want to grab the text box, but only the one that lives inside the hidden box. Okay, I just want this one. So what I can do is use document query selector. If you don't want to give it a unique ID, is look for the text box that lives inside the hidden box. So that is something you can do using query selector as well. Great. So now all I want to do is when I click on here, I'm just going to get our inspect tool to help us out a bit. If I click on here, I want to expand a column to the left. So let's add an event listener to this pill. So let's grab the expand pill, and I'm going to use add event listener to listen out for clicks. And if I click on it, I want to call a function called expand, which we are yet to define. So I'm going to use functional expressions for this. You are free to use whatever you want, but this is the format I'm going to use to write a function. Now, for now, I'm just going to grab the hidden box, which at the moment is of course hidden. And I want to, so if you click on it, I want to grab the hidden box and I want to assign style width to it. And I'm just going to assign this width of 1700 pixels to it. Okay, great. But it also means that we actually have to grab that class name, and in the styles, I don't believe we've done this. We need to grab that hidden box, and as the starting style that it's assigned, I'm just going to go with height auto because it doesn't have a height at the moment. Width is going to be 0. And let's just give a background color while we are here. I'm going to go with RGB and this kind of gray color. Okay, so now the hidden box has a height. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to see it. It has a width of 0, and then we're going to override that width to be 1700. One other thing I need to do is say that the parent of what the hidden box lives in, as well as the box container, make sure that these two are next to each other, and the parent is the body. So I'm now going to grab the body. So let's find the body. And just use display flex in order to make sure those two things are next to each other. Okay, so let's test it out. So all I'm going to do is click here, and great, you will see that expands. However, if we click on it again, it does not shut. You'll also notice that transition has been added. This is thanks to the fact that we added transition all up here. Okay, so that's just a little bit of a reminder for you about what this piece of code does. Now, let's carry on. So we've expanded our hidden box. However, we want to then also handle how to shut it, right? So what we would do is say that if hidden box client width essentially does not equal 0, well, then we want to put it to 0, right? So we get the hidden box style and then we override it to 0 pixels. Okay, so if it's not 0, then we want to make it 0, else we just assign the width of 1700. So we can even just put a 0 here. That is absolutely fine too. Maybe let's just make it a string. So once again, let's check it out. So let's refresh. There we go. And it's now opening and shutting with the transition being applied. Next, I want to show the text, but I want the text to show up slightly after, okay, this opens up, so that it opens up and then we show the text literally 200 milliseconds later. So all we're going to do for that is remove the class of hidden from here, okay? We're going to take it off and take it back on, and we're going to put in a set timeout to apply a slight time delay. So when essentially we expand, after some time has passed, I'm going to use set timeout and pass a callback and essentially invoke this callback after maybe let's say 500 milliseconds. What do I want to happen? Well, I'm going to grab the text box. So the text box that lives inside the element with the class of hidden box. And all I'm going to do is use class list, and then I'm going to remove the class of hidden. Okay. And same for up here. If we click on the expand pill and it's open, right, because the hidden box does not have a width of 0, well, I'm going to get the text box and I'm going to add the class of hidden. However, I want to, so add the class of hidden. I want that sound immediately. And this time I want the other thing to happen after some time has passed. So essentially I want the text to disappear and then I want the box to start shutting. So that's why I'm going to put this in a set timeout. Let's maybe make it 200 milliseconds this time. I'm just going to grab that and put it in here. So let's look at this function doing its thing. So that is the complete thing. And there's our event listener. Whoosh. And then we see the text. And then we shut it. Whoosh. And we see the text. Maybe let's center this text a little bit more. So let's actually find our search for our hidden box. And I'm just going to use flexbox. So display flex, justify content, center, and let's align everything from top to bottom as well. So there we go. And that just means that it looks more like this. Maybe we need to text align as well. Text align center. Let's have a look at how that looks. Of course, you can style those up much as you want. You can even get the hidden box and say that anything with a class of text box that lives inside it is going to have a margin of 30 pixels just to space it out. And perhaps we don't want text align center. Let's see how that looks. Okay, I think that looks better. So let's carry on. We are now done with this part. We're going to add a video there later, as well as link up all but we'll do that soon. Next, let's work on rotating all of these so that the flex direction is changed. So let's pick out the rotating pill. So let's go back in here, and it's the reverse pill that we need to grab this time. So let's grab the reverse pill and use add event listener to once again listen up for a click. And if we do, we just want to reverse, right? So let's define reverse, const reverse, just like so. And all I'm going to do is once again, if the box container, because it's the box container, right, that holds everything that we applied the flex direction to. So if the box container, so let's get the box container that we've already picked out. If that style flex wrap equals wrap, well, then we just want to get the box container and change the style, right? We want to change the style of flex wrap to be wrap reverse. Okay, so that's all we're doing. We're getting that and we're assigning that to flex wrap if flex wrap equals wrap. Otherwise, we just want to set it to wrap. Okay, so let's check this out. So let's refresh. And there we go. We're now reversing the order of these pills. It's looking so cool. Okay, we've done two things. What else do we need to do? I think the next thing we should do, so we're expanding that to view the text. We're seeing the text here. I think we want to essentially work on the slider next. So I want the slider to essentially change the theme of this whole thing. And this is going to be quite complicated. So get your concentration hats on and let's do it. So on the same level as app.js, I just want you to create a new JavaScript file. I'm going to call it colors.js. And in here, we're essentially going to hold all our themes. And we're going to import the content of this. So we're going to read this essentially thanks to the script tag. So right up here, right before we read this script tag, I want to read the colors first so we can use them. So all you have to do is this. So now we're going to read the contents of this first and then the contents of that. So what's going to be in here? Well, all I'm going to do is define our color palettes. So color palettes, just going to make it bigger for you. Color palettes, you can spell it the American way or the English way. Let's go with American. And my color palettes is essentially going to be an array, which is going to hold one array. It's going to hold 3 arrays in total, but here is the first one, or maybe even 4. The first one, the reason I'm doing this in a separate file is just because there's going to be a lot of colors in here, okay? And I don't want to keep it in the same file for organizational purposes. So my first color is going to have a fill, and it's going to take this color that I have picked out. So I've already done all the picking out of colors for you, and then it's going to have an alternative stroke. By alt stroke, I just mean that if I want to fill a pill with a color, I'm just going to show you this alt stroke, and then we're going to have 1A, 2F8. Okay, make sure that is a string as well. Okay, 1A, 2F38. Cool. So here, the fill, so whatever I choose to color my pill is going to be the fill, and the alt stroke is going to be whatever I choose to change the stroke or the I guess, border of the pill 2. It's a stroke for SVGs and it's a border for the pills. So that's what I have essentially done here. And we're going to have to do this a bunch of times. So I'm just going to do this for you, and I'm going to give you the code because it's too boring for me to just write all these out. It took me a really long time to get these color palettes. So we've got 1, and we've got 2, then we've got 3, then we've got 4, then we've got 5, 6, 7, 8, there's a few, I did say this was boring, 9, 10, so I did mentally prepare you, 11, and 12, although I'm not sure why these are RGBs. Maybe let's change them to be hex. So what is the hex? Oh, it's here. Just to make things a bit more consistent. Of course, this is something you could do at the end. Probably don't worry about it now, but when it comes to clean code, please go ahead and do that. And we don't need these Fs at the end. So there we go. So those are my colors. You can kind of see the color palette showing up here. You have like a lighter for the fill and a slightly darker for the stroke for all of them. So that's just one array, okay? We're going to have a few more. So this time I'm just going to paste the whole array instead. So there is our second array. Again, you can see the colors. They're a bit more neutral this time. And you can see the third array. So those are my arrays. Just go to the repository and find colors.js and essentially just maybe paste this whole file in here like so, so the content of the file, so we can carry on. Great. So now we've got the color palettes. Let's actually apply them. So what I'm going to do, maybe let's just do this up here actually. What I'm going to do is just say that we want to start with palette, the first one. So I'm just going to hard code it to 0, just so that we know that that's a palette we are going to work with. Okay, palette index is 0. So essentially this is an array, right? We're going to go into the array and get the first item, which is this whole array. That is what we're going to get back if we pass a 0 into the color palettes. So essentially if I go that, right? But oh, our variable palette index is a 0. So we could just pass that. Okay. So if you see me writing that, that's what that means. I'm just getting the first item out of this array because palette index is 0. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. I'm also going to define which index the X letter is at out of all these, and it's 0, 1, 2, 3. Well, actually, it's not. It's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, because we're going to have the same color here. Okay, I think that's right. Let's just try that out. So let's go with const X letter index is 11. I think that should be it, or maybe it should be 12, but let's just see how that looks. And I'm also going to find the index of this rotate icon index, and that's 0, 1, 2, 3. Const rotate icon index is the 3. Just so we know where in our array of pills to find these two things, because as you know, they are SVGs. This is an SVG and this is an SVG. So we're going to have to treat them differently if we want to change the color of these paths. Let's carry on. Now let's define our start state. So whatever state we want to start with of the actual app itself. And for that, well, I'm going to get the S letter SVG style, and I'm going to get its fill, because we can change the fill of the SVG by grabbing the SVG itself, not the path, and changing its fill. So all I'm going to do is go into the color palettes, and I'm going to get the first one, right? So I'm going to pass through the palette index, and then I'm going to go into that array even further. So I'm going to go into this array, get the first item. So all of this, right? Because this has index 0. And once I'm in here, I'm going to go in again and get the X letter, which is the 11th index, as we said. So I'm just going to go X letter index to apply that color to it. Okay, and then once I have that, so let's go in here and just say which one's the 11th. I think this one's the 11th. We're going to get the fill of that. So I'm just going to get the fill, not the alternative stroke. So this just means if I refresh this, great. Okay, so that's amazing. Let's move on. Now I want to also apply the colors to all of the pills. So I'm going to get all the pills that I just picked out, all pills, and for each pill, I'm going to have to actually get the index of it as well, as we're going to loop through the array of colors. And I am going to get each pill and get its style, and I'm going to get the background color of it. And I'm just going to go into my color palettes again. And I'm going to open that up and pass through the palette index. Maybe let's put this on a new line. And this time as the second one, I'm just going to pass through an I, as we're going to loop through all of the items in our palette index array, the first one. And once again, I'm going to get the fill from that item. So we're literally just looping over this whole thing and getting the fill and applying each one to the pills. So that's all I've done. So now if we look in here, and maybe let's get rid of the background color of these. So let's go into style and all the background colors that I applied. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this and this. And I believe that is it. Let's save that. And great, we have now applied those colors. This is looking good. If I want to change the color palette, okay, if I want to get the second item from the array, well, that's color palette index 2, right? It's the second item out of these 3 items in color palettes. I could just go ahead and change this to index 1, and that will be applied. And now let's do index 2, and that will be applied. Okay, so this is looking so cool. We need to apply maybe the same color of that to all these 3. There isn't a 4th one, so we're going to have to account for that. Okay, so if we do 3, nothing will happen. Okay, so maybe let's put this back to 0 for now. And we're just going to have to loop over. So great, that is the start state. I also want to pick out all the hidden pills. And for each hidden pill, so the ones in the fan, right? I am going to get the hidden pill and use style background color. And all I'm going to do, well, maybe let's define the social fan index. And I think it's index was 0, 1, right? So I'm just going to add a 1 because now I'm going to pass through the social fan index. So I'm going to go into the color palette, just pass through the palette, do this on a new line. Palette index, and then let's pass through the social fan index and just get the fill of that. So it'll essentially be the same of the second item in the array each time. This is looking wonderful. Let's carry on. So now I essentially want to change the width and the style of each of these if I slide my slider. So let's define our move slider function. So maybe let's do so down here. So this time if I get the slider input, which I've already picked out, and use add event listener on it to listen out if the input changes, I want to move slider. And let's define move slider. So I'm just going to move this up and let's do it here. So const move slider. What I'm going to do is get the freshest input. So I'm going to use document query selector. I'm going to look for the element with the ID of slider input. So essentially we're looking here, let's search for slider input. We're literally getting this so we can get its value. So that's what I am doing. Let's save this as slider input. And now let's get the slider input. And like I said, let's get its value. And I'm going to save this as the const slider value. So there we go. So now we have the value. Whenever we move it, we'll get the latest value because we're literally grabbing this again. We have to grab it again to get the freshest value. If slider input value equals 0, well, we're going to essentially add a theme that we are going to define. And we're going to essentially write a function called add theme. We're going to pass through different parameters to define that theme. So that is one thing we're going to do. Also, if slider value suddenly is larger than 1, but also, and slider value is smaller than or equal to 3, we want to add a different theme. So add a different theme. And if slider value is larger than or equal to 4, but also slider value is smaller than or equal to 6, we're going to add a different theme. So you get it now, and we're just going to do 2 more. If slider value is larger than or equal to 7, but also slider value is smaller than 9, we'll add a different theme. So make sure that is in the curly braces. And finally, if slider value, let's just say equals 10, we're going to add kind of like the final theme. So there we go. You can make it strictly equals if you wish as well. So that's literally our move slider function. It looks kind of simple, but let's get to writing our add theme function next to really make this work. So let's do so up here. I'm just going to move all of this down. So const add theme. This is going to be kind of hard for us to see until it's finished, but I'm just going to essentially pass through a few things. I'm going to pass through the background color of the actual body itself. So maybe let's go with body background color, because that is one thing we're going to pass through. The other thing we're going to pass through is the stroke width. So the stroke of the SVGs, but I'm going to also apply this to the border width as well, because we want them to be the same, so it can be the same. Next, I'm going to apply the SGV fill. So I'm going to define, I'm going to pass through whatever color we want the SVGs to be. So like the main color, not its outline. And I'm also going to pass through an opacity value, because I'm going to change the opacity sometimes on the actual pills themselves, as well as the SVGs. Next, I'm going to pass through the line color. I've called it line color as we're going to apply this to the border of the pills, as well as the SVG strokes, and as well as the border radius, because we want to round stuff off a little bit and have the pills go from squares to actual pills. Okay, so obviously there is a lot here. I'm just going to put it on separate lines so it's way more readable for us. These are all the things that are going to essentially affect our theme. The next thing I'm going to do is pass through a box background color. As I want the background color of the actual box itself that holds the pills and the SVGs to change. And now I'm going to pass through the pill background color as well. And I believe that is it. Okay. So those are all the things that we are going to add to our theme. So let's do it. Let's define how we're going to add our theme. So what we're going to do is get the body, and we're going to get the style. I'm going to get the background color and just assign whatever body background color we pass through into here, right? Next, we're going to get the S letter path. So the path of the letter, and use style stroke width to change how thick each of the SVG's borders are. And I'm just going to apply that stroke width. Next, I'm going to get the S letter SVG style fill, and I'm going to change the color of it by assigning it an SG fill. Or if that does not exist, I'm going to get the color palettes. I'm going to get whatever palette index we are on, and I'm just going to assign it the X letter index fill. Next, I'm going to get the S letter SVG style opacity, and if there's an opacity to be applied, I'm going to add that opacity. Now I'm going to get the X box, so the box that holds the X, and use style background color to assign the box background color, which we pass through. And again, if that does not exist for any reason, I'm going to go into the color palettes. I'm going to pass through whatever palette index we are on, and I'm just going to get whatever the X letter index is and get the fill to apply it to the X box. Okay, great. Now I'm going to grab the icon path, so the rotating icons path style, and change the stroke to be whatever line color. So the line color that we're going to assign to all the pills and the SVGs. Otherwise, again, if that does not exist, I'm going to get the color palettes. I'm going to pass through the palette index. I'm going to pass through the rotate icon index and get the alternative stroke. And finally, I'm going to get the icon path, style, stroke width, and just apply the stroke width to it. Okay, we are not yet done, however. Next, we're going to get all the boxes, so every single box, and for each box that exists in my project, so everything with the class of box, I'm going to get the box, get the style of it, and change the background color just to be the box background color we passed through. Okay, great. Otherwise, again, if that does not exist, I'm going to get the color palettes, palette index, I, and get it fill. Okay, I'm doing if not exist because at some points we are going to not want to pass this through, okay, so that it just defaults to whatever we have in the array, or sometimes I'm going to want to actually change that, which is why I've done this. You will hopefully see what I mean by this when the time comes. Next, I'm going to get all the pills, and for each pill, let's pass through an I as well. Let's put this in parenthesis. We're going to do a lot actually, so I'm going to get my curly braces. I'm going to get the pill, I'm going to get its style, I'm going to change the opacity to whatever opacity we pass through, if that exists. Next, I'm going to get the pill style, background color, and I'm just going to assign the pill background color if we have one in mind. Otherwise, I'm going to default to the color palettes. Let's pass through the palette index. Let's pass through an I, and we're going to get the fill. Okay. Next, we're going to get the pill style border width and just assign the stroke width. Sorry, the stroke width. A lot more to do. Next, I'm going to get the pill style border color and assign a line color if we have one in mind. Otherwise, I'm going to default to the color palettes, palette index, pass through an I, and get the alternative stroke. 2 more to go. We're going to get the pill style border block style, and we're just going to make it solid, as well as get the pill style border radius and just assign it the border radius. And let's also grab all the hidden pills, right? All hidden pills. So for each hidden pill, this one is easy. We don't need to loop, but we do have a few things we need to do. What we need to do is get the hidden pill, get its style, get its opacity, and just assign the opacity. Next, we're going to get the hidden pill, get its style, get its border width, and assign the stroke width. Then we get the hidden pill, we get its style, we get the border color. And then if a line color exists, if we decide to go with something different, then we give that. Otherwise, let's refer back to the color palettes, the palette index. And then I think it was, what is the hidden? What is the index? The social fan index. And get the alt stroke. And finally, let's get the hidden pill. Get its style. Get its border radius this time. And just assign the border radius. Okay, one more to go. We just need to grab all the arrows this time. So all arrows for each arrow. I'm going to grab the arrow, get its style, get its border block style, and just assign it with solid. Then also get the arrow, get its style, get its border color. And I'm just going to assign the line color, get its arrow, get its style, get the border width, and I'm gonna say it has to be 0 plus whatever the stroke width is. Maybe let's make it a space because we're just going to make it kind of, you know, different. We're gonna go border width 0 at the top left, stroke width on the top right, plus a space, plus stroke width again, plus a space, or we can just do plus 0 like this, okay? Because essentially we're just trying to mimic what it would look like, okay, if it was in a CSS file. And we want to add a different border width to each side, which is why we've done it like that. And finally, I'm going to get the arrow style and get its opacity and just assign the opacity. So there we go. That is my full function. I know it is a lot, but this just means that after we've done this, we can use add theme. So I can do add theme, and we're just going to pass through a few things. What we're going to pass through is these, right? So I'm actually just going to make a line of these here so it's obvious to us what we have to pass through and we don't have to keep referring back to this. So I'm just going to put them all on a line for us, just like so. Maybe let's make this a little bit smaller. Apologies for those struggling to read, but we need to see all of these because now this will be easy. To add theme on one slide at 0, we're going to pass through the body background color, which I'm going to say I want it to be white. Then the stroke width. So I'm going to apply 12 pixels to everything so that all the pills and the SVGs have a stroke width of 12 or a border width of 12. For SVG fill, I'm going to put null so that it refers to whatever our color palette says it should. For the opacity, I'm going to do 1, so it's kind of not opaque at all. For the line color, I'm actually going to pass through RGB 383838, so kind of dark gray for the line color to be applied to the whole project. And then for the border radius, I'm going to hit 100 pixels. And then for the box background color, let's go with white. And then for the pill background color, I'm going to go with null so that defaults to our color palette. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And it just means that on 0, it should look like this because it's essentially adding, you will see that it's defaulted to the color palette when we added the fill as well as the pill background color, right? We're just getting colors from the color palette. And all the outlines are that kind of RGB 383838 gray, and it's just looking so good. And that has been applied to the arrows as well as the SVGs. So now let's work on what happens when we go here. All right, we've just moved the slider. So all I'm going to do is use add theme again, and let's pass through the next values. So I want the body background color to be white again. This time I want it to be 1 pixel stroke width, or maybe let's go with 2. Let's not make it so rash. Let's go with white for the SVG fill. Let's go with opacity 0.5. Let's go with line color null, so it refers to our color palette, 75 for the border radius, and then null for the box background colors refers to the color palettes, and the pill background color, I'm going to go with white. So now let's have a look at this. So if I move this here, ta-da! As you will see, all the boxes have now been applied. So all the pills, sorry, have been applied a fill that is white but 0.5 opacity. And all the boxes, I've taken the colors from the color palette and the borders are 2 pixels in width. This is looking so cool. Okay, I'm really enjoying this. And let's see if there's any errors. There are no errors. So this is looking wonderful. Let's carry on. So I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger because let's do add theme here. And this time we're going to pass through white for the body background color. Then we're going to do 2 pixels stroke width. Then we're going to do white for the SVG fill. Let's do 0.5 opacity still. Now we're going to pass through that gray color. For the line color, so it doesn't go to the color palettes anymore. Let's do 50 pixels border radius, and let's do null for the box background so the color palettes get applied, and let's do white again for the pill background. So now if we refresh, we go here, and then we go slightly further, you will see that change happening. Okay, great. So now let's carry on. Let's do a few more. So let's add theme. Maybe let's even change this one to be 1 pixel. Maybe actually let's change this to be null for the border color so that the color palette gets applied. I'm just going to change to be 90 so it's not as aggressive, which means that now I'll make this white. Let's make this 2 pixels. Let's make this white. Let's give 0.5 opacity. And now let's do the gray color. So 38, 38, 38. Let's do 50 pixels border radius. And let's do null so the color palettes get applied. And let's do white. Okay, so once again, let's check that out. Okay, so those are the states that we have so far. Great. I'm liking how these are being applied. And let's just do the final state. So add theme. Let's pass through this gray as the background color. So the body background color. I'm going to pass through 12 pixels. I'm also going to pass through white, 1 opacity, and then I want black for the lines. So for the strokes and the border lines, 0. And then let's do transparent for the box background color and white for the pill background color. So now, once again, that does not seem to be applied. Why is that? Maybe let's console log the slider value. And inspect the page. So we're at 0, we're at 1. Okay. And then when it's 10, it should change. Maybe because it's not a number. So that is why. I mean, you could have had a string there as well. Essentially, the value is a string, not a number. So just keep that in mind. So there we go. We have now done it. This is what it should look like. This is looking good. I think if we look in here and look for the X box and use add event listener, let's make this a little bit bigger now, to listen out for clicks. And if we do have a click, then we want to change the palette. So I'm just going to do change palette and let's define it. So const change palette. And all I'm going to do is essentially, well, maybe let's make the X letter pulse a bit. So I'm going to add a class list of add pulse, and let's define it. So in here, I'm going to grab the class of pulse, and I'm going to use transform. I'm going to do transform origin. So we're defining the origin of where it transforms origin from, and I want to make sure it's at the center. And then animation, I'm going to say I want pulse, so we're going to define it. I want to have to for 0.5 seconds, ease in and out. And then I want animation fill mode. I just want it to stop. So I'm going to go forwards. I want to stop at its last state. So now let's define pulse. I'm going to use keyframes. Let's define pulse. And this is a relatively easy one. I'm just going to say that at 0%, I want to transform scale to be 1. And then at 50%, let's go with transform scale 0.95. And then at 100%, I just want it to go back to 1. Okay, so that's one thing we're going to do. Next, to change the palette, I'm just going to say that if palette index is smaller than or equal to 2, right? So when we've kind of come to the end of the array, I just want to reset palette index to be 0. Otherwise, I just want to get palette index and add 1 to it. And then I'm going to move the slider. Okay, so I'm just going to call the function move slider just so we get the freshest value and we get the freshest theme, and we apply the new palette to it, right? Because we're changing the palette, but nothing will happen on the UI unless we call the function that will actually add all those colors again. And where does that happen? In the move slider function. So cool, let's check it out. So if I now click on here, whee, all those palettes are now changing, and we are getting all of them. Of course, not the final one, because that's like a special one that we wrote. Of course, once we add that pulse, it will only be applied once, so we need to remove it. So another thing we have to do is after we move the slider in a set timeout, I'm just going to remove that class. I'm going to go X letter path class list, this time remove pulse, and let's make it happen after 500 milliseconds. So that just means that now it will pulse each time. Wonderful. So the hidden pill, I need to change the style background color of it too. So just like the pill, we're going to go with the pill background color, or if one does not exist, we're going to go into the color palettes. We're not going to loop, however, because we know which one we want to get. We want to get the social fat index. So we're going to pass through essentially a 1 in there. And that just means that now, of course, it works here, but if we go here, that works too, and it works for all of them. Great. Some final bits of styling. I'm just going to change the font. So all I'm going to add is the fact that if our iframe exists, which it does, we're going to be putting our video in there. I'm going to change the width to be 100% and also the min height to be 300 pixels. I'm also just going to make sure that any font and A tags that live inside the hidden box, so this as well as this, are just going to have a specific font size, and that's going to be 18 pixels. Okay, so I've just made that a little bit bigger. And of course, this link works. I think that's all the links. Let's have a look. So let's go back in here. Let's go to the hidden box. Click here to view more. Maybe let's change the A tags as well. So for each A tag, let's make it have a color of red. I'm just going to change that out a bit. Again, please feel free to change the colors. I will be cleaning this up so it doesn't use RGB and hex. Okay, so that is good. And then we're going to put in a video here. Of course, at the moment, I don't have a video to put in here, so I'm just going to use one from my course. let's maybe go check this out. So let's view this video. I'm going to take the URL to this, and then I'm going to put it in here. So just do that. And now I need to change this URL. So I'm just going to get rid of this, and I'm going to put embed / and then we can add controls if we want. So I'm going to do !, controls. Well, actually, let's just do 0. So that is saying that we don't really want the controls. Okay, great. Of course, if you did want the controls, you could change that, but I'm happy with this. So wonderful. This is looking so good. The other thing I'm going to do is just grab each hidden pill and say that any A tag that lives in here, I'm just going to give it a bit of a margin. Okay, so 0 from the top, 150 pixels on the right, 0 and 0. So 0 on the bottom and then 0 on the left. And it just means that that text will now kind of be more to the left, as you will see here. And another thing I'm going to do is just say that everything in here is going to have a specific font size. So font size 25 pixels if a font size hasn't been assigned. So it's just a little bit bigger. That is looking much better to me. Before we move on, I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. So let's just have a look through here. There seems to be a closing tag missing here. And then also, I believe the website, this should be SAAM. I'm also going to just account for how all the boxes look like on mobile. And to do this, I'm simply just going to grab the large box that has the ID of Squish. So just like so. And I'm just going to change the min width of it. So I'm going to override the min width to 150 pixels and make this important to make sure that it overrides this generic large box style. Okay, great. Now here, we didn't actually use this, so let's go ahead and remove that. And then also we want to, this is something that we didn't do, we want to get the X letter path and change its line color, right? So we're going to do style stroke and then simply change it to be whatever the line color we're passing through. And if there isn't a line color, I'm just going to change it to whatever the color palette is. We're going to pass through the X letter and get the alt stroke of it. Great. So there we go. That is our site.
Okay, so we are nearly done. One last thing, and that is that I just want to make sure that when the hidden box is visible, we stop the overall scroll on the site, and this will do that.
So there we go. That is our site. Okay, so now all I'm going to do is go back to Hostinger. Let's log in, and this should be super easy. We're just going to host these files. So I'm just going to log in whichever way I chose to log in previously. And then I'm going to navigate back to the panels that we had before. So if you've clicked off, just go to Manage. Here we're going to essentially go to Hosting. And then this is what we're going to manage on here. We're going to go to the File Manager. This is super easy, so just go ahead and click on that. And once you are directed to the File Manager, we can upload our files. Okay? So all we're going to do is click on here, and I'm just going to find my project. So here it is, and I'm literally just going to drag it in. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to drag in that like so and wait for it to do its thing. And that just means if I now visit codersdxp.com, ta-da! There is our site. It is up and running. That was live, by the way. That's literally how little time it took for me to host these onto the internet. I will put a link down there so you can have a look at this yourself. But essentially, we are done. Okay, so wonderful. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Please do check this out as it will be live, and do let me know what you thought of it, or if you thought I could have done something differently, or just in general how you took this project and took it to the next level and made it your own.